Hello and welcome, guys. This is the start of a brand new series that I am so excited to bring to you. I have got my fabulous co-host, Salty Texas C. How are you doing?
I am so stoked to talk about this stuff. I can talk about woo-woo paranormal stuff all day long. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you are welcome. Yes. What we wanted to do, guys, is bring you a companion piece to the paranormal show that we do on Salty Texas's channel. And what I thought we would do is kind of bring in our love for cryptids and the supernatural side. That is what we are going to do with Supernatural Showdown.
There's no shortage of really interesting regional, for the lack of a better word, monsters, phenomena out there. And the more you start looking, the more weird stuff you find. Now, some of it's completely crazy to me, let's be honest, right? It's tourist trap stuff. But there's some stuff out there I actually think has a pretty good chance of being real. Whether that makes me sound crazy or not, I don't know.
I think you're onto something, and I think with especially the two that we picked to kick things off with, there might be a more than a hint of truth behind these. So shall we jump into our first contestants for the showdown?
We've broken this down into 4 general categories. The first one would be commonality. The second one would be how lethal is this? Is this a proven danger to human beings? Then believability. Then, of course, we're going to render our final verdict.
Let's kick things off with, I think, 2 of the most famous ones, and I can't think of 2 better than, obviously, the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, depending on what you want to call him.
This is so exciting. I wish we could have them fight. I wonder who'd win.
Can you imagine?
I'm sorry, I'm derailing your show. That's what I do. Go ahead.
So I have chosen to represent the Loch Ness Monster today, or Nessie, as she is most commonly known. Most people will know this creature. It's one of the, I think, most famous cryptids of all time. And if you go to Scotland, you will see Nessie's likeness all over the place. I've actually been to Loch Ness, and it's quite an eerie place, I've got to admit.
I hear that it's incredibly deep as far as an inland freshwater lake goes.
It is incredibly deep, and there are actually tunnels that lead out to the ocean from this lake. So it does give some level of credence to perhaps there could be a marine creature living in this lake, because, as you say, it is a very long lake and it is a very deep lake. It is an ancient body of water.
Interesting. When was the first reported occurrence of somebody seeing Loch Ness?
Well, we've had sightings going all the way back to 565 AD.
Wow.
Saint Columba, in fact, was said to have encountered this creature whilst swimming in the lake, and he actually told this thing to go back and to not attack people. So that was the first really big recorded sighting of this thing. But it was from probably about the 1930s where the sightings really kicked off, and then you get the very famous doctor's photo. I think that everybody was seeing, the long neck sticking up out of the water.
I remember seeing that as a kid, and I believed it. But then, of course, that's what kids do. I do think there's some compelling evidence that there is some type of phenomena in Loch Ness. Is this still something that comes up on a regular basis, say, in the media there in the UK?
Periodically, we get sightings, I think, between the 1980s and the early 2000s. It kind of peaked again. There was a lot of explorations of the lake, particularly using sonar, where people really wanted to kind of get to the bottom of this once and for all, to try and find out if there was indeed something down there. Lots of things were found. Really big eels were found, that sort of thing, but nothing that really kind of classes as Nessie, the classic plesiosaur creature that we know.
Interesting. So from a lethality standpoint, is there any evidence of aggression toward human beings by this phenomenon?
No, there have been plenty of people who have seen it from the shore. They've seen it from the roadside. A couple of people have claimed to have seen it actually crossing the road. Actually, it was out of land, so it was almost like a giant seal kind of flopping about, trying to get back into the water. But as far as I'm aware, there have been no boats reported being attacked. Nobody who was ever
Mm.
swam in the loch. I wouldn't recommend it. The water is extraordinarily cold. But as far as we know, nobody has ever actually been attacked or come into physical contact with this thing.
So here's an interesting question. Are there any related disappearances or disappearances that have occurred around Loch Ness that maybe could not be explained?
You're referring to things like the missing 411, where people
Mm,
disappear from bodies of water. Not
mhm.
that I know of, as I say. Only things that have ever been recorded are people that have been either standing on the lake or, looking over the lake and have seen things, or,
Ah,
ripples on the surface, or maybe the head poking up occasionally. Nobody has ever been reported as going missing around that area.
do you have any personal experience? Have you seen Nessie? Have you seen Loch Ness?
I haven't, unfortunately. As I say, I have been lucky enough to actually visit the loch and to kind of stand on the shores, and it's quite a eerie place. Even when the sun's shining, it's very dark because
Oof.
the cliffs either side are quite steep. The lake is incredibly deep, so the water is very dark and murky. It's beautiful, but quite a sad place, I found.
Sounds like a good place to drink a good scotch.
Absolutely.
So, what does the evidence that you found lead you to believe, Purple? Do you think the Loch Ness monster exists?
I would very much like to say that I do believe that there is something there, but unfortunately, I do not believe so. No, the Scottish people out there will probably be, hounding me for saying that, because obviously they love Nessie, and as they should. But there just isn't enough evidence out there to prove that this creature really does exist. As I say, there are large eels that have been found, there are sturgeon that have been found, but nothing that would really kind of fit the criteria of the creature that's been described.
Well, I'm going to say, because I'm a Yank and I don't know any better, maybe. And I say maybe because of those inland sea passages that you said that were under the lake that went out to the ocean. Whenever fresh water hits salt water, that is a very food-rich environment. So if this thing could exist, it has the optimal conditions to eat and to hide. So I'm going to say maybe. That's my take.
That's a good take. I like to err on the side of possible. Absolutely.
Yeah. We need a little woo-woo in the world.
We do, yes.
So I'm going to represent North America because this phenomena ranges all the way from arguably up to the Arctic, well down into Mexico. I am referring, of course, to the one and only Bigfoot or Sasquatch, depending on where you are.
Bigfoot, a fantastic first creature to talk about. What was the first reported sighting?
Well, believe it or not, the first documented sightings occurred way back in 1792, and they were recorded in a journal of a Spanish traveler by the name of Jose Mariano Mozino, who was traveling through the indigenous peoples on the Pacific coast. And the book is actually called An Account of the Nootka Sound. So the story starts in 1777. They were exploring and they ran across the local Nootka tribe. And then, of course, this journal was passed down from family member to family member until somebody actually read it and realized that they were talking about Bigfoot. So this didn't start to be reported until 1913. So,
Wow.
150 years later, they translated this remarkable journey of discovery into English. So what that revealed was there was a creature by the name of Matlock, which dwelled in the mountains and terrorized the tribespeople. Now, Matlock was described as having a monstrous body covered in black, bristly hair. The creature's skull was similar to that of a human's in shape, but much larger, with sharp, strong fangs, similar to a bear or wolf. Also, its arms were long, with curved claws on its fingers, and it was known to emit a terrible scream. Now, of course, the local indigenous people believed the creature was some type of demon. And there we go. From there, the reporting on Bigfoot hasn't stopped.
Yeah, so that leads into my next question. I'm guessing that because the sightings are so prevalent, they are still continuing to this day.
Oh, obviously. I'm someone who lived in the Pacific Northwest for a number of years, and I can tell you a couple times a year people think they see them. And I spent a lot of time in the deep, deep woods in places where there aren't roads out in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not talking about Seattle. I'm talking in the coast that is rugged and wild, and there have been reports of UFOs out there too. But interestingly enough, Washington State leads the United States in total reported Bigfoot sightings with nearly 700. The next closest one is the state of California with 500. And then, believe it or not, Florida comes in third with 330. It seems to be those states with the more forested, obviously, that would seem to be habitat where Bigfoot is. So doesn't seem particularly prevalent on the East Coast, which is weird. Very strange.
Yes, that's quite a range of habitats. And with all these sightings, has there been any proof that has been put forward?
Well, there's that famous grainy black and white film that they made a documentary about Bigfoot. I think that came out in the early 70s. Now, I actually went to go see that with my grandparents, and it scared the hell out of me. I'm going to be honest with you. Did that influence my own experiences with things? Because I grew up in the middle of nowhere, in a very isolated place, and was surrounded by woods and fields. And I had an experience where I was out at night trying to find a lost dog, and I was really sure something was tracking me. And I don't think it was a bear, I mean, am I a reliable witness? No. But I think I saw something I can't explain. What is fascinating is they keep finding footprints. We've all seen these casts they've done with cement over the years of these incredibly elongated large foot, which gives Bigfoot his name, of course. But there was apparently some fur that was found that was sent off to be analyzed by an actual lab, and I think that was done by the actual Bigfoot Research Institute, and the results came back inconclusive. And if you really want to have your mind blown, the University of Oregon actually has a professor of Bigfoot studies, and I believe they had a television show about that on the History Channel where they went out and tried to call Bigfoot.
That is cool. Can you imagine having that as a doctorate? That is pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, I'd say you probably make more money than gender studies, but hey, this isn't that kind of show, right? Come on, yeah.
So we've talked about where it's found. What about the lethality of this creature? Has there been any reports over the years of people coming into contact with it, and has there been anyone harmed by it?
There have been multiple reports over the last 200 years of contact with Bigfoot. There are anecdotal stories from the 18th century and the early 19th century of miners, explorers, loggers being abducted, taken away. It's always the same description: a very large, bipedal, hairy creature, has the claws, glowing eyes, immense skull, emits this incredibly terrifying scream, and then takes them. And then somehow they manage to escape. At least those are the ones that came back to tell the story. Now, what would be terrifying about this is that this thing ranges in description from 6 to 10 feet tall, generally speaking, and is covered in black, dark brown, or dark reddish hair. I think you could go state by state by state. People have seen them varying hours, but I know when I was in the Pacific Northwest, everybody said Bigfoot hours were between the hours of 4 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. That's when the most, I would say, if you're going to call them reliable sightings have occurred of Bigfoot.
So Bigfoot's an early riser, basically.
Well, like most predators are on the move at dawn and dusk. They're also our prey, so it would fall in line with an animal behavior.
That would make a lot of sense. Now, you've talked about personal experiences. Has these had any effects over the years on you? Is it something that really kind of left it a mark, an impact?
Yeah, I don't go into the woods without being armed in a couple different ways. I won't go into details on those where it is legal, and that's for a variety of reasons, obviously. The other part too is, going deep into really remote national forest land and national parks, you need to have your wits about you. and you need to be prepared for almost any contingency. So I'm not saying that Bigfoot is in the top 10 things I worry about when I go out, because I'm worried about bears and I'm worried about breaking my leg. But you know what? You do have to think about, what's a multitasker that could deal with that? Would bear spray have an effect on Bigfoot? I probably, I have camped all over North America, including Canada, the Yukon, Alaska. And boy, I got to tell you, when you're woken up by something rustling outside and it sounds big and it's huffing, there's a lot of things that go through your mind at 2:00 in the morning. So yeah, I would say it has had an impact on me.
You talked about evidence that has been found. There have also been recordings, if I remember correctly, that have said to have been these cries and shrieks that have supposedly come from Bigfoot.
David Paulides put out that Missing 411 The Hunted, and there is an amazing sequence in there where he goes out with somebody who is part of MUFON and part of a big Bigfoot research institute, who said in the 70s he had an experience where Bigfoot attacked their camp, and that's what drove him to become interested in this whole Bigfoot Sasquatch thing.
That is fascinating and terrifying at the same time. The final thing that we have to ask is, do we believe that Bigfoot is real? What's your verdict?
I'm going to go with maybe. These myths were here before European settlers came, among the indigenous people. They are up and down the West Coast and even into the interior into Montana. I believe there is something there. Now, I've seen some really wackadoodle things where Bigfoot are interdimensional travelers or operate UFOs and things like that. And that would be cool, but I don't think that's the case. If they are there, I think maybe the more that we encroach upon their land, the more they're probably likely not to show themselves. But again, having lived in very, very remote rural Washington state, there is a whole lot of trees and a whole lot of land to hide.
Yes, and if I remember correctly, there is quite a lot of the US that's been kind of unmapped and people have never set foot there. So there is a heck of a lot of land that they could still be hiding out in, and they could quite possibly be nomadic as well.
Who knows? They could maybe dwell in caves. Maybe they hibernate like bears. I mean, there are so many possibilities to this. It's not wishful thinking to me. This is a maybe.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think there's just too much evidence to completely dismiss this. There's too many eyewitness accounts. There's too many people over the years who have described the exact same thing over and over and over again. And as you say, this was even before European settlers set foot on the US soil. I'm going to say that I do believe that Bigfoot does exist out there, and I think it's actually far smarter than we give it credit.
We're both on Team Bigfoot. I like it.
Absolutely. Oh, this has been fun. I love getting to talk cryptids, as you know. Getting to do this and to pit two of the most famous cryptids against one another and just to kind of talk about them has been an absolute blast. So thank you, Salty Texas.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for the invite. I will talk about this stuff all day long.
Guys, if you enjoyed this series, please leave us a comment below. Who would you like us to cover? What do you think should be next? And do you believe that these creatures exist? We would absolutely love to get to hear from you.
Absolutely.
We are just starting to scratch the surface. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the very first Supernatural Showdown. There will be many more to come. Take care.